You will often hear Orthodox Jews, or Jews in general, but specifically anti-Christian polemicists, make the claim that Christianity, while loosely based in the Hebrew scriptures, is actually a distorted, paganized version of it, and that Christianity as we know it is actually an idolatrous pagan belief system. Now, while this is obviously not true, and we can address that, for example, the idea that the Trinity is a pagan idea, it's actually the early Jewish Christians that brought that to pagans and converted them to Christianity, not the other way around. The idea of multiple gods existed in paganism. The idea of modalism existed in pagan societies at the time. But the idea of the Trinity of three persons in one being of God, that does not exist in paganism. That is a biblical concept that the early Christian Jews brought to the pagans. We could make a whole video about that, but for now, that's actually not the purpose of this particular video. In this video, I actually want to demonstrate how it is actually Rabbinic Judaism that draws much more heavily on pagan beliefs and is influenced much more heavily by paganism. Specifically, in this case, Babylonian paganism. Now, as an added bonus, afterwards, we're actually going to demonstrate from this how, in their normal fashion, the rabbinic scholars actually validate Christianity. They try to invalidate Christianity and debunk it and so on, but accidentally and through little slips here and there, they actually validate Christian beliefs while rejecting Christianity and rejecting Jesus. Now, that's going to be a little bonus for the end of the video. So what are we actually discussing today? There is this character or figure or being referenced in the Hebrew Bible called the Leviathan. Some people interpret it as a dragon or this kind of beast. In Jewish beliefs and eschatology, it's a sort of giant sea monster fish kind of thing. And while there are different legends that talk about it in a very biblical sense, symbols, allegories, this exists in Judaism and in Christianity. There is a particular legend, an eschatological belief in Judaism that's referenced in the Talmud, in various midrashic sources, about a end times battle between the Leviathan, and another mythical beast called sometimes called the behemoth or behemoth, and sometimes called the shor habar, this wild ox beast creature. And in this Jewish belief, which you can actually find in the Talmud in Masechet, that is Tractate Bava Batra, and in various midrashic sources, when you piece them all together, you have this legend where the ox, this mythical giant beast creature, and the Leviathan, this fish mythical beast creature, are actually going to have this cosmic battle in the end times, where the ox will gore the fish to death, and the fish will slaughter the ox with its fins, and then the righteous of Israel, the tzaddikim, will actually feast on this fish as this magnificent meal in the end times. Now keep in mind, and this is going to be very important towards the end of the video, Jewish people do not believe the Messiah has come yet. So when we're talking about eschatology, end times beliefs, this is in the Messianic era, the coming of the Messiah and what will happen then. That's going to be very important later in the video. So in this end times battle, the ox is slayed by the fish is slayed by the ox, and then God will actually stretch the skin of the fish over the righteous of Israel while they engage in this feast as a sukkah, like a tabernacle kind of thing, like the Festival of Tabernacles. And this will actually cover them while they're engaging in this feast of the righteous and so on in the end times. Now, aside from being not biblical, this whole thing is actually completely based in a pagan Babylonian story. In this passage in the Talmud, I'm not sure how relevant this actually is, but it kind of starts off where they're saying, in Babylonia, we interpret this as, and then goes into this whole discourse. But this is very evidently a Babylonian mythology found its way into Judaism. Now, you could make all kinds of claims about different traditions in Judaism or Christianity and alluding to this end time stuff. They're all based in the Bible. And again, I want to remind you that just because something is similar to a pagan story doesn't mean it's unbiblical. There are a lot of things like that that are very biblical, and it happens to be that various pagan traditions have similar concepts. Superficially being connected does not invalidate the biblical story. But in this case, there are specifics in the story that actually demonstrate that it is very clearly a pagan Babylonian myth. Now, before that, I actually want to play a video of a rabbi, Y.Y. Jacobson, actually discussing this, just so you know that I'm actually telling you an authentic thing about Judaism. So let's listen to that first.
Will be specifically between the Leviathan, the whale, the great titanic large fish, and the Shir Habar, which literally means the untamed, undomesticated, wild ox from the outside, bar. And the behemoth, the wild oxen, will stab the Leviathan fish with their horns, with its horns, and tear it open, so the Leviathan would die. On the other hand, the Leviathan would do the same thing to the ox, where it would use its powerful, the edge of its fins, and gore the ox, and it would die. And that would become the feast of the righteous people, La'asid Lave, says the Medrash in Shmini Yud Gimel, similar to what the Gemara says in Baba Basra, Ayin Daled, Ayin Hey, that the Suda of Leviathan and Shir Habar, the feast of Leviathan and Shir Habar for the Tzaddikim when Mashiach comes.
So you've seen that this is actually a tradition in Judaism. He's actually going to talk about something a little bit after this. I'm going to play another clip in just a moment, showing how these legends actually validate Christianity by accident. But in the meantime, how does this demonstrate that this is a pagan Babylonian myth that has found its way into Judaism? Well, if you were to simply say there's going to be a battle between these creatures and so on, you could kind of point to them in scripture and show that. However, when you add the feature that the skin of the Leviathan will be stretched over as a tent over the righteous of Israel while they engage in this feast, that is eerily similar to Babylonian myths around Tiamat, this sea god creature, Babylonian sea creature thing that engages in a battle with another god, Marduk, and after she is slain, her skin, this mythical goddess creature, is draped over and stretched over to create the firmament of the sky and so on. So we don't just have loosely alluding to a biblical creature and making up a story about that, which would be very common in Midrashic literature. That wouldn't point to it being Babylonian or pagan in any way. But once you add certain details, like the skin of this creature being stretched over to make a sky or a tent or whatever it is, that demonstrates pretty clearly that it is based in Babylonian mythology. And keep in mind, the rabbis that are discussing this are in Babylonia while they're doing it. And this passage in the Talmud actually starts with that little caveat. In Babylonia, the tradition is to interpret it and then goes on to the rest of the story. Now, that I think is pretty obvious that it's a pagan Babylonian myth that has found its way into Judaism. So while Jews are claiming that Christians are pagan, there are clear pagan beliefs within Judaism, and there are so many more. That's just the one I wanted to focus on for this video. But here's the next important point. I'm going to play that clip from Y.Y. Jacobson going a little bit further. But essentially, there's actually this funny thing where some Jews claim that the fins of the Leviathan will be so sharp that it will be able to slaughter the ox in a kosher ritual way. But that's not actually what the Midrash says. There's actually a next part, and I'm going to play the clip with Y.Y. Jacobson, an Orthodox rabbi, discussing this, where the Mishnah, after citing this, the Midrash, after talking about this legend, then asks a very interesting question.
The Midrash itself asks on itself, poses the question that this contradicts a Mishnah, a Masechta Chulin, that there is the limitation of Shechita that you have to use only an instrument that slaughters the animal a specific way, and the fin would be disqualified just like the sickle. Thus, how can a tzaddik, how can any Jew eat this ox that was not slaughtered halachically, even after Mashiach comes? Halacha is halacha, ha-Torah hazayis leita'im chlefes. The halacha is the laws of Torah will not be changed. And on this, the Medrash answers based on a pasuk in Yeshaya, that Torah me'iti teitzei, chidush Torah me'iti teitzei. There's going to be a new Torah, a new novel in Torah, a new novel insight in Torah that's going to allow them to eat this shit.
So I know there was a lot of terminology there that maybe some of you don't understand, but essentially what he's saying is, it's explained, quoting a verse in scripture, that there's going to be a new Torah that will address this. And they make the claim that it's a temporary one, but essentially what they're saying is there's going to be part of this new Torah in the Messianic era that allows for the righteous of Israel to do this. So essentially, the law of Moses being suspended in the Messianic era. And that's why I said earlier, it's very important to remember that in Jewish eschatology, the Messiah has not come yet. And so when we're talking about these mythical things in the end times in Jewish culture, it's actually in the era where the Messiah is coming and this is all happening. And so it's very interesting that Judaism is saying, well, when the Messiah comes, there are going to be circumstances where the law of Moses, in the way that we knew it before, is suspended and a new law will take place. So while they're trying to justify their pagan Babylonian myth, they actually validated Christianity, right? Because Jews will say, well, Paul changed the Torah and ruined the law and suspended the law. But the way that it was done is actually validated by Jewish midrashic texts, saying that in the Messianic era, when the Messiah has come, there are going to be certain things about the law, and we don't understand why this happens, but certain things will be suspended and will be a little bit different. And he even, if you look at Y.Y. Jacobson, referencing a verse talking about a new Torah. So not only does this show that Judaism has been influenced by pagan mythology, but in trying to justify that, they actually make claims that validate Christian beliefs. So while rabbinic tradition rejects Jesus and rejects Christianity, they actually validate all the core concepts behind it. And I've done other videos demonstrating even more of that, concepts about heaven and hell and the law and the Messiah and so on. So I thought that was really interesting to point out. Again, if you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment whether you agree with me, disagree. I'm trying to work on being less rude to people that are rude to me, so feel free to bash me in the comments if you disagree. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And again, please like, share, subscribe, comment, and stay tuned for further videos.